Welcome to Life Stories, where the people you overlook become the ones you can't forget. What if your entire family believed you were a failure, while you were secretly building a billion-dollar empire? What if the only way to be seen was to disappear first? Today's story is about silence, not the kind that means surrender, but the kind that hides the most powerful kind of transformation. It's about a daughter dismissed, a dream buried, and the moment everything they thought they knew shattered. Stay with us, because by the end of this story, you might just ask yourself, who would I be if I stopped living for their approval? Now, let's go back to where it all began, with an invitation no one expected her to accept. The morning sun fractured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Avery Reynolds' Seattle penthouse, casting golden shards across the marble floor. The invitation sat in the center of her desk like a loaded weapon, white cardstock, gold lettering, the annual Reynolds family reunion printed in elegant serif font. She hadn't attended in 7 years, and for good reason. But this year, everything had changed. Not because she wanted it to, because the world had decided it would. She stared at the screen in front of her, still open to the Forbes homepage. There it was. Avery Reynolds, the silent architect of mythos and the $10.2 billion reality revolution. Her face, composed but fierce, stood in contrast to the cascading digital murals of AI-generated artwork behind her. The article had gone live at 6 a.m., and by 6:03 her phone had started vibrating off the desk. Her mother had already left 2 voicemails. Her brother Ethan had sent 4 texts, one of which just said, "What the hell, Avery?" And her sister Brielle, perfect, poised, always in control, had sent nothing at all. That was the loudest of all. Avery took a sip of her espresso, the bitter warmth grounding her. For 14 years, she had let them think she was scraping by. Let them think the beat-up Civic, the mismatched clothes, the Craigslist apartments were a result of failure, not strategy. And she'd never corrected them. Never defended herself when her father called her the family wild card, or when Brielle offered to sponsor her rent as if she were a charity case. Why? Because Avery had decided something most people never dared. She would rather be underestimated than misunderstood. Her phone rang again. This time, she answered. Avery, Ethan's voice crackled through the speaker, already bristling with accusation. Why the hell am I reading about my sister in Forbes before hearing it from her? She leaned back in her chair, gaze locked on the Seattle skyline. You're hearing it now. There was a pause. Then, Mom's freaking out. Dad won't stop pacing. Brielle, I think she's in denial. She always is, Avery said flatly. You could have told us. I tried, she said quietly. You weren't listening. Ethan sighed. So what now? You just show up to the reunion and drop this on everyone? She stood, walked to the window, and watched her private helicopter land on the helipad of the adjacent tower. No, Forbes already did. Click. She ended the call before the guilt could creep in. Amanda, her executive assistant, buzzed through the intercom. Miss Reynolds, the Ashmere compound is secured. The jets are ready for pickup, and the guest villas have been customized. Each welcome packet includes, well, everything. Perfect, Avery said. Make sure the name plaques on the villas are spelled exactly right. No mistakes. Amanda hesitated. Even the annotated financial reports? Especially those. Avery returned to her desk and picked up the invitation again. The irony twisted in her chest like a knife. They had sent it out of obligation, assuming she wouldn't come, assuming she couldn't. But this year, the story would be hers to tell, and it wouldn't be told in whispers anymore. Her mind drifted back to a night that had shaped her more than any investor pitch ever could. She was 23, sitting at the Reynolds family's Aspen Lodge, the fire crackling, but the air inside somehow colder than the snow outside. Her father, Greg Reynolds, sat at the head of the long dining table, sipping Bordeaux like it was boardroom fuel. Avery, he said, not unkindly, just firmly, this AI art stuff, it's time to grow up. You've got a Stanford degree in economics. That's not nothing. She remembered staring at her calloused hands, the paint still on her sleeves, the half-finished algorithm running in the background on her laptop upstairs. I just closed a deal with a design firm in Copenhagen, she had said. They're paying me for. Greg cut her off with a wave of his hand. Paying you to tinker. Not a real business. Not a future. Brielle, with her polished nails and Manhattan corner office, chuckled over her wine. I sent you money last month because your lights were almost shut off, Av. I love you, but it's exhausting watching you chase glitter. Avery hadn't responded. She'd gone upstairs, locked the door, and cried for 3 minutes. Then she opened her laptop, checked the wire transfer from that Danish firm, $40,000, and went back to work. She never brought it up again. But now, 14 years later, the world had finally seen what they didn't, or refused to. She walked toward the far wall of her penthouse, where a single frame displayed one of her earliest pieces, Echoes of Light. A digital fusion of childhood memory data and visual AI, it had sold as an NFT for $48,000. That piece funded her first engineer. That engineer helped her build Mythos. And yet no one in her family knew that the app her father's company once rejected had just been adopted by a leading Scandinavian university as part of its neurology and art therapy program. They thought she was a fluke. They didn't know she was a revolution. The intercom clicked again. Amanda's voice was cautious. Miss Reynolds, there's someone downstairs asking to see you. Avery frowned. Who? She says she's your mother. She won't leave. Silence. Avery's hand trembled slightly as she placed the invitation back down. Send her up. 10 minutes later, Meredith Reynolds stepped into the penthouse. Still elegant, still poised in her beige cashmere coat, but there was something fragile in her eyes, like a porcelain vase starting to crack. This place is yours? She whispered, taking in the curated digital gallery walls, the scent of fresh bergamot, the quiet hum of money. Avery nodded. One of 3. I live here most often. It's close to the labs. Her mother blinked. Labs? Where we test emotional response mapping and AI visual narratives. Meredith sat down slowly, her voice brittle. I thought you were selling paintings on Etsy, maybe doing commissions. You thought what Dad told you to think, Avery said, quietly but not without sting. Meredith looked at her for a long moment. Why didn't you tell us? Because the last time I brought a prototype to dinner, Dad said I should look into opening a bakery instead. Brielle said she'd hire me as her assistant. You all wanted me to be safe, not seen. Meredith looked away. We were afraid. Avery tilted her head. Of what? That you would fail so completely, we wouldn't know how to save you. Avery walked over to the drawer, pulled out a single folder, and laid it in front of her mother. Meredith opened it, eyes widening with every line. Investor breakdowns, Series A funding, neural design partners, valuation letters. Then, at the very back, a small sticky note, written in Avery's unmistakable handwriting. This is the project I begged you to believe in. 2016. You said it wasn't real. Meredith looked up. Her face was pale. This would have changed everything. Avery nodded. It still will. She turned back to the window, the morning light catching in her eyes, sharp and endless. What would you do if your own family never believed in your dream until it became undeniable? Can silence be more powerful than confrontation when it's used to build something lasting? But just when Avery thought she'd finally gained the upper hand, someone else from the past knocks on the door, holding a secret that could unravel everything. Continue to part 2, The Visitor. The knock at the door wasn't loud, but it echoed through the penthouse like a warning. Avery stood still, fingers tightening around the edges of the portfolio she'd just shown her mother. Meredith was silent, still seated, her eyes red but dry, as if whatever apology she wanted to give had already been swallowed whole by guilt. Amanda's voice crackled through the intercom. Miss Reynolds, there's a man downstairs. He won't give a last name. Says you knew him in Portland. Avery's stomach tightened. She hadn't heard that word, Portland, in years. Not since the time when her apartment was smaller than her walk-in closet now, when her only source of heat was an old space heater and the buzz of adrenaline every time a commission came through. There were maybe 5 people in the world who could claim they knew her in Portland. only one she'd never expected to see again. "Send him up," she said, barely recognizing her own voice. Meredith glanced at her. "Who is it?" Avery didn't answer. The private elevator hummed, then the soft chime, and when the doors slid open, the past walked in. He was taller than she remembered, lean, bearded, but with that same half-smile that once made her believe the world wasn't just a machine to survive in, but something worth feeling for. "Hello, Av," he said, like no time had passed. Avery didn't move. Caleb Hart, the first person who had truly believed in her work, and the first person who'd ever broken her. Meredith, sensing the shift in air, stood quietly and touched Avery's arm. "I'll give you a moment." When the elevator doors closed again, Avery turned away, pouring herself a fresh cup of tea, though her hands weren't steady enough to hold it. "You have nerve," she said finally. He shrugged, not flippantly, but like someone who had spent years practicing this moment in his head. "Yeah, I've had a lot of time to grow one." "I thought you moved to Prague, or Tokyo, or wherever it was you said you'd be finding yourself while ghosting me and vanishing from the company." "I did go to Prague," he said, walking slowly toward the window, "and I did lose myself. But I also found something you deserve to know." She scoffed. "You think I care now? After a decade? You should." He pulled out a worn leather folder from his satchel and placed it on the table where just minutes ago Avery had handed her mother evidence of her empire. But this folder looked older, frayed edges, ink faded with time. "I never meant to walk away," he said quietly. "You know that AI rendering tool we built together? The prototype you thought failed?" She looked up sharply. Cal's voice lowered. "It didn't fail. It was stolen." The room seemed to tilt. "I was young. I was stupid. I trusted someone I shouldn't have. I submitted our work to a startup incubator behind your back, without your name on it. I wanted the exposure. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd fix it once we got funding. But they took it and ran with it. You thought the system was flawed. But the truth is, I was the flaw." Avery couldn't breathe for a moment. Her heart, steady as code in crisis, skipped. "You mean, that code was the basis for Lyratech," he said, naming one of the largest visual AI engines currently in circulation. "Their CTO was in my cohort." Silence cracked between them. All this time, Avery had believed the early failures were her fault. Glitches in the code, imperfections in emotional rendering. She blamed herself for not being ready. She'd buried the heartbreak of that loss under years of silent rebuilding. But the truth was worse. Not only had her work been stolen, it had been stolen by someone she loved. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough, "but also to return something." He opened the folder. Inside was a hard drive and a signed affidavit from Lyratech's former VP of Engineering, confirming that the original codebase had not only been Avery's, but that it had become the foundation of Lyratech's earliest models. Avery stared down at it, her breath catching. This wasn't just an apology. It was proof. Legal, verifiable proof that the algorithm she'd written at 24, sitting in a one-bedroom Portland loft, was now powering billions of dollars in AI-driven design worldwide. She could sue. She could own part of Lyratech overnight. She could take back what had always been hers and shake the industry at its core. And yet, she said nothing. "I didn't come for money," Cal added. "I came because I couldn't live knowing you thought you failed. You didn't. I did. And I'm sorry." She didn't speak for a long while. Instead, she turned toward the city, toward the cloud-streaked horizon that had once seemed so far away. "You should go," she said at last, her voice soft. Cal nodded, leaving the folder on the table. He paused at the elevator. "You were always the real visionary, Avery. I just borrowed your light. And now, it's time the world knows where it truly came from." When he left, she didn't move. She just stood there, staring at the folder, the hard drive, the affidavit. Her hands trembled, not because she was angry, but because part of her wanted to forgive him. And she didn't know what that meant about her anymore. Would you forgive someone who betrayed your trust if they finally gave you the truth? What would you do if the power to reclaim everything you lost suddenly sat in your hands? As Avery prepares to confront her past at the family reunion, a new choice threatens to divide her values and expose the cost of long-buried silence. Continue to part 3, The Table She Built. The morning of the Reynolds family reunion arrived not with a roar, but with a hush, as though the entire island was holding its breath. The sun climbed slow and golden over the horizon, brushing the glass villas of Ashmere Isle with a light so soft it looked almost painted. Seagulls wheeled lazily overhead. Waves whispered against the shore. Avery stood alone at the center of the marble deck, her white silk blouse rippling slightly in the breeze. Behind her, the yacht named Sable, a nod to the first digital brush she'd ever coded, floated like a sleeping beast, regal and silent. Ahead, 3 helicopters descended one by one, carrying with them the people who had once doubted everything she was. Greg Reynolds stepped out first, the patriarch whose voice had once ended every argument. But today, there was no command in his stance, only hesitation. Meredith followed, her eyes softer, older. Then came Brielle, immaculate as ever in her designer heels, clutching Carter's hand a little tighter than necessary. Ethan arrived last, shoulders tense, sunglasses hiding eyes Avery once knew like her own. They were all here, and none of them were ready. Avery smiled, not smug, not cruel, just steady. "Welcome," she said, voice calm but unmistakable. "I hope the journey wasn't too jarring." No one answered immediately, but the silence this time wasn't dismissive. It was stunned. The villas had been prepared to the smallest detail: monogrammed welcome letters, custom-tailored loungewear, personalized room scents based on memory cues. Even the name plaques outside each door glowed with subtle light, shifting hues depending on the viewer's emotional state, an art piece in itself. Avery guided them to the main atrium. A long table stretched beneath a vaulted dome of glass, through which the sky unfolded in perfect clarity. On each plate sat an ivory envelope. She didn't sit. "I want to thank you," she began, "for every time you underestimated me, every dinner where my work was laughed off, every dollar you offered as a bandage for the belief you never gave." She paused, letting the words settle. "You helped me build this, not in support, but in absence. And for that, I am truly grateful." Greg cleared his throat. "Avery, she raised a hand gently. "Please, just listen." She walked slowly down the length of the table. "When I was 24, I lost something. Not just money, not just code. I lost faith in people and family. And it took me years to learn that building something doesn't erase that loss. But sometimes it transforms it." She reached the end of the table, turned and pressed a small button. The glass wall behind her shifted into a screen, illuminating a timeline, the unseen years. From Portland to Prague. From the creation of Mythos to the latest beta, a new branch called Alethea, designed to help survivors of trauma reconstruct memory landscapes through safe, interactive visual AI. Then came a clip. Avery, age 23, disheveled, eyes burning with quiet hope, presenting to a webcam in a cold apartment. "I know no one sees this yet," the younger Avery said, "but I believe we will. And when we do, I hope we remember who we became to get there." The screen faded. No one spoke. Finally, Brielle looked up. "I don't know how to say sorry in a way that fits what I feel. But I see it now. All of it. You were never lost. We were." Avery exhaled, something inside her uncoiled. Greg stood next. His hands, always so sure, were trembling. "You made something I didn't understand, so I dismissed it. But that wasn't your failure. It was mine." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, crumpled envelope, the same one Avery had given him 6 years ago. The original pitch. He unfolded it with care, like a relic. "I kept it. I didn't read it back then. I should have. I'm ready now." But the moment of grace was interrupted. Amanda entered quietly, whispering something in Avery's ear. Avery's face shifted, her eyes narrowing. "You're sure?" Amanda nodded. Avery turned back to the family, suddenly more fragile than she had been all morning. "There's one more thing," she said, voice tight. "Yesterday, someone from my past came to see me. Caleb Hart." Gasps. Silence. Greg frowned. "That boy from Portland?" "He admitted something," Avery said, placing a small black hard drive on the table. "The rendering tool we built together? The one I thought had failed? It didn't. It was stolen. My early code became the foundation of Lyratech's current models, and Cal, he gave me legal proof. Shock rippled across the table. Ethan leaned forward. You're saying they built their empire on your work? Avery nodded. And I could take it back. The lawyers are already circling. Greg's jaw tightened. So what are you waiting for? Avery looked down at the drive, then slowly pushed it aside. I'm not going to sue. Brielle blinked. Why? Because I already won, Avery said simply, and because choosing peace over revenge is the first thing I've done entirely for myself. The family was silent. I don't need to tear something down to prove I can build, she added. I already proved it, and more importantly, I remembered who I am, not who I was trying to be. As dinner began, something shifted. Laughter emerged, not forced, but fragile, genuine. Ethan asked to invest in Alethea. Brielle offered her marketing firm's resources. Greg asked Avery to speak at a tech summit he was chairing in November. But the moment Avery cherished most was quiet. Later that night, alone on the balcony, her mother joined her. They said nothing for a long time. Then Meredith reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote this after Prague, she said. I wanted to send it, but I thought it was too late. Avery opened it. Dear Avery, I miss you. Not the version we expected you to be, but the real you. I hope one day we stop trying to rewrite you into someone safe and start being proud of the woman brave enough to write her own story. Love, Mom. Avery folded the letter and held it to her chest. This time, she didn't cry. She didn't need to. That night, in the stillness of Ashmere Isle, surrounded by art born from solitude and fire, Avery Reynolds finally felt what she had built was more than a company. It was a home for the parts of her that once felt too strange, too soft, too much. She didn't just sit at the table now. She was the table. And everyone finally understood she had never been trying to prove them wrong. She was just proving she was right to believe in herself. What part of Avery's journey resonated with you the most? Was there a moment that reminded you of your own story? Comment 100 if you felt inspired by Avery's transformation. Where in the world are you watching from? Share this story with a friend who needs to remember that silence doesn't mean failure. Thank you for watching Life Stories.